Any questions before we begin? All right, this chapter we are discussing advertising management. What does that mean? Well, it means that whatever we contribute to an expenditure for purpose of advertising, sending messages out in order to get people persuaded to purchase what we offer, it has to make sense. Right? It has to provide a return. You can't just have a limited amount of money and have a failed campaign. Right? Not good. We lose money. Which means here we want to kind of understand theoretically why people buy what they buy in the first place. Right? How do we send out effective ad designs to get people to inclined to purchase what we are offering, product or service, right? So we'll look at a couple theories in advertising. But think about how much stuff goes into pushing out an ad, right? So this is marketing communications, so you're like, well, everything involves messaging. Messaging is a core component of the course. You're saying, hey, any signal or message is extremely important. Unconsciously, you're like, well, some things may come out of a person looking at something that they never knew they felt in the first place, right? So you're like, it's about between the rational mind and the impulsive mind. Sometimes we could create a need or desire in there, and you say, yeah, I actually never knew I actually needed it or wanted it. I didn't know that in the first place. What we find is that most advertisements are created through focusing on emotions. So ultimately what we're saying is human beings are predominantly emotional over rational. Right? It's predominantly emotional. That's not a bad thing. Like we have these emotions evolutionarily for a purpose. They're there to help us survive. If you didn't have any emotions about something disgusting, you would eat something disgusting and you would resist, right? Essentially, visually sense that it's disgusting, appealing to you, you probably won't eat it, you probably won't eat it. So it has its purpose. Now with those emotions, you're like, well, emotions involves a lot of things. How you feel about yourself altogether, so people's self-esteem, self-worth. Like advertising can build self-worth. It can work on your personal values, where you're like, hey, I'm a healthy, conscious person. I am consciously healthy. I live a healthy lifestyle. Right? Advertisers know that. That is particularly to your generation, right? You all love probably hit the gym, look organic, may have some vegans in the classroom, right? And you're like, well, that's a personal value to you, right? There's probably something that you tell others, like, hey, I have a healthy lifestyle, right? And then just everything. So I'm going to Whole Foods to look for organic, going to Trader Joe's, right? Things of that. There's something personal, how that can be conveyed to push you to buy more of those sorts of things is up to us as marketers and advertisers to promote that. Right? So some different theories, some different kind of concepts that have sequence to them, and how do we manage all of that, right? Other things, we think of colors, right? We may think colors are not that important, but each and every color has a significant purpose in terms of how you feel about it. Right? The color white tends to be kind of neutral. When we say neutral, it's good. It's like balance. Balance is calm. Feel calm. Right? Red brings excitement and energy and stimulation, right? And urgency too. And that's why we have Coca-Cola as probably the most successful advertising company on earth ever. Hence why the Ferrari is red, right? Hence why Netflix is very, very popular, right? You would think like, well, it's a concept. Yeah, sure, to some degree. There's also the imaging, right? The perception that Netflix Microsoft Windows, right? A lot of marketing research has went into this to say, how do people respond? You can hook people up to see their sensations and their brains wired to see how they respond to different colors, right? How do they feel about purple? What does purple represent? Not only, represent, in fact, it represents royalty, right? So when I think of purple in my mind, and associate something dealing with royalty. Royalty is high. The color black we think is very sleek, right? It's the void, right? The absence of color, which is cool. Like it's just different, it's sleek. All right, so all these things kind of go into it, as well as fonts that we use, right? All sorts of things. All right, so in this chapter, we're looking at how do advertising theories guide the advertising management process. Remember we talked about theories like, hey, what is our best thinking and understanding on the application of advertising? Right? What are some of the best modes of thinking on how this applies in real life? What's the relationship of advertising expenditures to effectiveness? Right? Just because you put out a ton of money doesn't necessarily mean you'll have a successful campaign. Right? So the best success is your strategy. Right? And strategies change and evolve in some degree. Right? They may have the same steps, but they may change and evolve because the technologies that we use change and evolve. How people use those technologies evolve. When should a company employ an external advertising agency rather than completing the work in-house, right? Everybody said if you want to get into real estate, anyone here wants to invest in real estate, own some properties, right now. What are you thinking? Houses, multi-family, like duplex, threeplex?
Multi-family apartments.
Alright. What are you thinking? Joseph, what are you thinking?
I have no idea, I just know that I want to.
You just want to get into it. Right? So you're like, hey, you know what? I'll have the property, I'll manage it myself, I'll do it all. Why? I want to save money. I want to save a buck. It tends to be the common reason why people would do such a thing, right? And then what happens is they find that some people do it bad. And after they found that out, they had already lost a ton of money, some energy, headache, dealing with tenants, all this other stuff. Right? So you're like, hey, you know what? Sometimes it is great to have a management company. Give them the 10% of all the income. Like, hey, you got 10%? Nobody ever emails you directly. Anything wrong with the property, you have a contract for it. They'll do everything. They'll collect the rent, right? And like, that's actually worth it. They have been doing a lot more than you have, maybe for a longer time. So like, sometimes there's a reason to use an ad agency, right? And sometimes there's a reason not to. It depends on the scope, right? You're like, hey, you know, I need a multifaceted advertising campaign. You may use an ad agency. And then how do we choose ad agencies? And then lastly, we'll talk about like creative briefs and advertising management and the global arena. All right, we have something called hierarchy of effects model. Right? Hierarchy of effects. This is our first theory. How effective are we with use of advertising, primarily when it's relative to an emotional component, right? Okay, but let's just get to kind of rational component. Like, all right, first thing is awareness, right? Your first step in advertising is how do I make someone notice my ad? How do I make someone notice it? Amongst the trillions of ads out there, how do you stand out, right? Takes a lot of thinking for that. We're scrolling, looking at so much stuff. We're driving on the road, there's so many stores, observed do you think have a really great strategy to stick out? Like they stick out amongst the others. Anything. And then like even going down to the cafe, what sticks out? You think of something that is really good at sticking out amongst this together. Yeah.
I was trying to say doing bingo, just like when they kind of like convert to like ads, and they're like TikTok ads, and they're just bright, big bird, green bird, like you know what it is.
Alright, you like, hey, you know what, I will stick out, my strategy is to repeat something multiple times, right? Like, hey, my competitors repeated once, they put their ad up, and they put the name one time on the ad. On purpose, I'm going to put the name 12 times within this ad. Top, bottom, left, right, a little paragraph, a little short saying, a little quick or something of the sort. And you're like, well, why did you do that? What's the point? Like, well, if I understand psychology, correctly, people have an aha moment for it to go to long-term memory. I know that things have to be repeated X amount of time before a person gets it. Right? That's just how we learn. So like, hey, so maybe sometimes repeating the name 12 times in a single ad may be more powerful, more strength to human memory than just putting one time. By the time you grow up, you're like, what was the name? Okay. Saw it 12 times. Right? You're like, well, that's a good strategy for building awareness, right? Knowledge, right? We have to convey information about, well, you have to convey information about anything. Like, what is it exactly you selling? Like, what am I looking at? Is this a banking ad? Is this a shoe ad? Is this a detergent ad? Is it something about lifestyle? Is there like some hidden message in it, right? Like, hey, what's the actual knowledge conveyed within the advertisements? Right, they put this example here, like, just imagine you went to, let's say what, Costco or Walmart, right? Well, not now, I mean, like, literally, like, which TV do you choose? You're like, well, you know, the TV that I will choose, you're like, well, I know my brands, I know what's a good quality TV, it might be Sony, right? Might be something else. But you're like, wait, there's a sale for 30% off this brand I never heard of, right? You're like, well, okay, that brand, that television brought me some sense of awareness, right? I'm gonna pay attention to it. Why? Because price is emotional. Well, I want to keep on the same one. That's an emotional thing. But you're like, but it's not a Sony. And then now you're going through your thinking. Do I go with what I know, or do I go with how I feel right now? I want to save a ton of money amongst a sea of televisions and advertising. Now you could say even with this ad, like, all right, where they have the sale thing, someone could put a ton of information. Here's the 5 best qualities of this smart TV. It could do this, it could do that, et cetera, et cetera. And that could be good knowledge. Liking, right? You know, we say advertising is like human relationships. Why do you like people? Why do you like certain people? Like this, it's interesting. And kind of in a relationship, a friendship, co-workers, right? Professors. What is so cool about that? What is so unique? What stands out amongst that? aesthetic. You're like, oh man, I like the way that looks. Right? And think about it, as an advertiser, you can create fake aesthetics. Think some sports cars, well, some cars in general have fake vents. Like, wait, it's just a piece of plastic that looks like a vent. The vent meaning that air comes out and makes it perform better. Now, we know that people like that look. And then their mind is gonna make them think the car will go faster, it will perform better, right? It's kind of an illusion. Some people would find it deceptive, right? But they're like, oh, mentally I associate things with performance. And you're kind of lost, right? But here we are, we're saying, hey, how do you build some sense of like preference, right? What do you prefer? Right? You could create preference. You're like, hey, you know what? In an advertisement, I'm going to compare myself against another brand and create a preference for mine. You're like, hey, you know what? Let's find a brand that has poor quality, that's super cheap, and let's do a side-by-side advertisement. And so you can see how great we are versus this other brand. You might think that's not fair, it's not really your true competitor in some sense. Right? But we can build preferences. Conviction. What is conviction? What is this word, conviction? What does that mean? What is conviction? Right? We build some conviction. We create conviction to our consumers through advertisements. Right? It can be in a few things. Yeah, you know, you can be like, well, I feel strong. Maybe a strong sensation about this, you know? Like, oh man, I feel a strong sense of guilt. I feel convicted. Or you're like, yeah, I feel strongly about this purchase. I feel very strongly, maybe positive way, negative way. Right? But ultimately, you want to create a sense that person feels very strong about their decision. Right? So you want to create a sense of conviction. Make them feel confident about this decision. And you can create that with other things too. And then finally, the purchase. Alright, so we say steps are sequential. So theoretically, we believe that this does work in that order. It doesn't necessarily work outside of that order. Some people do question if it does work in such an order, right? Remember we say, hey, this depends on high involvement, low involvement product or services. Are you purchasing the car or are you purchasing the candy bar? Right? Like you can rearrange the design of your ads based on what this is. Adding more information, less information, more use of color, less use of color, different logos, different signage, different packaging, et cetera, et cetera. Right, think about, say, candy bars, right? You're like, hey, you're the chief marketing officer for Snickers. And you're like, wow, this is a recession. And the price of milk, right, and the price of cacao, chocolate, right, have all went up. You're like, what do we do? Well, our competitors will just raise their price. You're like, all right, well, if they're raising our price, let's not raise our price. What do? Like, let's just make it smaller. Like, well, how do we make it smaller but still kind of appear the same size? How could you do that? How can you make something smaller but appear the same size? When we talk about chocolate, like candies, what have you observed Right, think about it, like, hey, with Reese's peanut butter cups, instead of 2 cups, just make a giant one. But the giant one might be slightly smaller in scale relative to the 2 normal size ones. This would get an illusion that you're getting more, right? Maybe we can charge a little bit higher too to get more money from it. Right, wow, that's an excellent tactic. Excellent tactic. Okay. Don't put 2 Reese's, put 1. Right? And charge a different price. Right, you can say, hey, you know what, make the candy bar taller, but more narrow. And then depending on how we stack it, it may appear to still look pretty good size. Right? You may not tell the difference. Now think about it, you're not reading the net ounce weight on these things. You're just you're visually looking at it, right? So things like that, you can change or rearrange, like, well, it's about proportion. We're changing our proportions to combat inflation, right? So that people still think they're getting a deal, right? They still want a value. Value is a personal thing. You say brand loyalty has to involve all 6 steps, right? It has to. You have to be aware, you have to have knowledge, you have to like, you have a preference, conviction, purchase, right? I would say, hey, this is similar to what we would call attitude. But what is your attitude towards something? You have a particular disposition about something. Or you may get excited towards one thing, you may feel sad about another thing, you may feel indifferent about something else, right? So we say, hey, you know what, it starts with cognitive, affective, then cognitive, right? Cognitive means think, rational, right? So you have your thoughts transfer into emotions, right? You have some sort of cognitive, subjective experience of it. So here's tricky, like, well, how do I make you think something so that I can draw that emotion from it? You're like, well, what if we associate one thing with another? We know that people get emotional about this other thing. What if we tie in that other thing with what we're actually advertising? Right? So that's tricky. How do you, like, everybody loves, not everybody, but you mentioned that most people love animal videos or some sort. Right? We all probably want to watch some sort of animal video sometime, right? Whether it's a bear, a wolf, a peregrine, falcon, cat, dog, et cetera, right? Like, how could we integrate that to draw a sense of happiness with that product? Anybody got a product that has absolutely nothing to do with animals? But what are we throwing an animal into this ad to draw a feeling of happiness? All right, now here's some personal values. These tend to be I think we've seen some of these before, right? Personal values. These tend to be some of the ones on a higher scale of advertising theory, right? Like, hey, human beings love comfortability. It tends to be one of our highest characteristics to be comfortable, right? Comfortable is sometimes subjective. Right? Comfortable may be convenient. Equality, excitement, freedom, fun, happiness, inner peace, mature love, accomplishment, right? Pleasure, salvation, security, self-fulfillment. And I would argue that a lot of this has to do with where you are now in college. I mean, think about is there one up here that wouldn't correspond to the reason why you're here in college? One of these personal values? Right? Social acceptance, guarantee you talk about your degree when you're done. Sense of belonging. Right? Wear the t-shirts, wear the school logos. Security, pleasure, personal accomplishment, I actually think this probably should be one of the highest ones. Usually people go to college as a personal thing. Happiness, inner peace, fun, exciting life, freedom, exciting, quality, comfortable life. Right? And they have a sense of wisdom. Sense of wisdom, I feel like, hey, school was worth it, school was not worth it. Well, college was worth it. All right, our next theory, means to end change. Right? So we say message is the means that leads to your end state. So remember we said those personal values. We have to send a message that leads to a sense of this. Right? Means to an end. How do I make you feel personal accomplishment? Right? Nike does that all the time. Freedom. Wisdom, right? How do you send out a message that leads to those personal values, right? The full technical name for this means and conceptualization of components of advertising strategy or mechanism. Right? So here we're looking at product attributes, the benefits relative to personal values. So here's a kind of a list showing you how they relate to each other. It's like, hey, benefits. We will advertise low fat, right, as an attribute. The benefits of low fat would be healthy. Healthy deals with personal values of people who have self-respect, and people who have some sense of wisdom about lifestyle, healthy and unhealthy lifestyle. Right? Let's say it is milk. So we will advertise calcium in milk. Right? And think about this, when we go look at different milk, you're like, okay, almond milk, oat milk, vitamin D, 2%, low fat, no fat, right? And then you see the ones with calcium. Like, ooh, does a milk already have calcium in it? Like, yeah, but add a little bit more calcium, right? Maybe you need that if you're calcium deficient. You're like, well, calcium, the benefit of that is healthy bones. Personal values for that is comfortable life and wisdom. Right? Maybe we list ingredients instead, right? That ingredients that lead to good taste. It's kind of like I was seeing, I went to Trader Joe's yesterday and called almond milk, but they have a vanilla almond, right? So it's supposed to be a better tasting milk. And so you're like, all right, well, the almond milk will give me more pleasure and happiness. That's the real feeling that I had about that. Vitamins, you may list the vitamins, right? Now here they're going outside the box, it's an enhanced sexual ability with vitamins, right? And what is that related to? More excitement, fun, and pleasure. All right, what is the message in this advertisement? All right, we're talking about means to an end. What are the attributes? What are the benefits? What's the personal value? Means to an end. Yes.
I mean, you could obviously just like in general be like healthier to healthy bones, and the benefits could be like your baby's gonna grow, you know, and then like the personal value is just like she feels good work as a mother for you know she's super working. Happiness. I know what you want.
No, I mean, you're right, you're right. You're like, hey, you know, what we saw, calcium is advertised, right? That's what's actually the word. We both need calcium, right? Considering me and my child, important, right? Like, I'll help you both need healthy bones, personal values, wisdom, and a comfortable life. Comfortable life for me, comfortable life for my child. If not, then someone's gonna be deficient, uncomfortable life, right? More hospital visits, et cetera, et cetera. B2B means in chain for marketing research services, right? And you can say, hey, you know, this is a huge part of marketing research. Like, hey, what are the words we use? What is the imaging that we convey, the message, et cetera, right? But even for business to business, we have attributes, benefits, and personal values, right? So we say attributes. Internet. The benefits of internet will be robust samples, leads to more job security. Speed, quicker results, self-fulfillment, expertise, actionable information, wisdom, social acceptance, personal values, experience, reliability, job security. See if I can blow this one up. All right, desired effects for visual and verbal elements combined desired effect. Who here have seen the, what was it, Netflix, TikTok kind of trend? Are you familiar with that? Where like you take any kind of photo and you can make it into a Netflix like movie ad? Have you seen this on TikTok? Right? This kind of reminds me of that. It's basically like, hey, you can take a pose of yourself doing anything, and you can just add the unique title, and that's essentially what Netflix kind of does with all this like content, right? They're like somebody who just be out there fishing, like, hey, get a picture of them right here. You catching some bluefish, like, oh, we put this on Netflix, right? This would be a Netflix. Like, oh, interesting. What is that? I want to see that. Right, but you're like, hey, there's some visual and verbal elements combined for the desired effect. Right, so visuals often lead to more favorable attributes. Human beings are predominantly visual creatures. Most of our sensors, let's say our sensors that we have, most are in our eyes. Right? When we talk about perceptive sensors. Right? So we're primarily visual creatures. We like things that are aesthetically beautiful in some way, right? The form, the layout, position, etc. Visuals are more memorable than verbal copies, so people tend to remember more visuals than they do spoken word, right? We say spoken word has to be repeated many, many times. Visuals often used in international marketing. We say, great, you know, different languages, but how we convey the same message? Well, just don't say much. Just put up a picture. Put up a picture that appears to be a universal message. But don't say much, right? Because you gotta convey this message all over the world in different languages. Right? So like, hey, this is more impactful. Say a little, but show a lot. Right? Say a little, but show a lot. Hey, how does, all right, so they want us to ask a question about this image. How does the ad shown in the previous page illustrate the power of a visual image? What, if anything, makes this visual image memorable to you? All right, so what's powerful about it? What's memorable about it? And how do the visual and verbal elements in this ad work together to create the desired effect? So, talk about this with your group, right? Simple. You're like, this is simple. I mean, it's what's there. I don't know. There's a lot of elements. There's something going on. Interesting. What's powerful about the message? Right? What do you think the desired effect of the message is? And what's memorable? What's powerful? What's memorable? And what's the desired effect? I'll give you a couple minutes to talk with your groups about this. Catching some bluefish. Yeah. I'll tell you the tagline, you can't read it, alright? So if you can't read it, alright, it says, catching some bluefish leads to catching some live blues in a small beachside joint. Live blues. How about big blues, big music, right?
That's very common, certainly. They're both. Even like the color grade is like it's not super poppy, but like it's the Canadian gold is very cool. That's just me, guys. I went in the goats, so I was like climbing up. Last year was nicer because it was like not much. Like you could like I remember I went there and I was like literally like I sat down and they're all well, I know it's just like he said like that train but if it were they would go and travel to this place.
Alright, powerful, memorable, effective. Right? In a sense, do you think like, hey, whatever was you believe was the desired effect that this had? Do you think that they got it right, or you feel like, no, it was weak? I completely unstimulated by this, did nothing. Or you're like, oh, it makes sense. I think they captured the essence of what they were trying to convey. And In the back.
We thought that the ad was pretty like cinematic. It almost looks like a movie poster.
Yeah.
Like the most attractive thing is like the background of the sky and how it was lit. It's kind of like romantic. It's kind of just like kind of sets a mood.
Alright, you say, hey, caught my attention, why? Because I thought it was a movie ad. Not a movie ad. Yeah, because at the bottom, so at the bottom, right, you probably can't see it, but it's listing, bless you, all the different, like, locations that this is gonna be in, right? So it says something beach, seaside, something. So these are all like cities that this will be in, right? I don't want to think actors or actresses. Okay, what else? Was there anything else? So it's saying, hey, you know what? It looks like a movie poster. It captures a romantic scene. And romance and live blues music maybe kind of go hand in hand. Therefore, successful, effective, or ineffective?
Honestly, I think it's kind of a little uneffective because it's kind of distracting. If you're not really paying attention to the words, you kind of can't tell what's going on.
Alright. Well, yeah, maybe just can put a live band up there or something, right? Why is that? I don't know. How about yours?
Kind of like what you said before, just like it's very aesthetic, almost like something you see right on Pinterest. You can tell it's like the sky and the background is very beautiful, and like if there's like a guy and a girl, kind of like implies like, oh, like they need to get together, and like it's like a romantic scene.
What about like the title, catching some bluefish, right? We used to catching some live blues in a small beach side.
I think
Is that anything, or you like, I didn't pay attention to that because that doesn't mean much or something, I don't know.
I think it sort of attracts a specific demographic of people, or like some people they're not even that eye, but I feel like if there would be like a target demographic of people who listen to live blues and go out and go fishing, like they, I don't know, like that demographic would stop and like read that and be like, ooh, blue fish, live blues, like that was cool, let me see this.
Okay. So you're like, hey, maybe it's not for everybody. Like, yo, this is for people that live in a beachside resort, maybe live near a beachside resort, right? It's like, kind of for them, they will pay more attention to it to some degree. Over here, any different thoughts?
Definitely, we noticed the background, the water, the color of the sky, it gives a little bit of like serenity, calmness in a way. And since they're both on a boat, we think that they're probably on a getaway weekend, fishing. Definitely the words catching some bluefish to leads to catching some live blues could be a little bit of a miscommunication to actually catching a fish to sing a concert on the beach side.
Gotcha. Like, hey, you know, catching some fish is such an experience because you're calm, you're in this beautiful environment, it's serene, you're in this boat, and then you get exhilarated, right? When you catch some fish, and that's kind of like catching some live blues in a seaside resort. It's like, wow, okay, I wasn't expecting this, right? There's a little bit excitement in this serene environment. Excitement in a serene environment. All right, what about here?
Well, we thought it was more like seaside dock. So they have this fishing areas, like a restaurant, one of the blues.
So you're like, hey, you know what, this is promoting like seaside docking areas, like areas where you have like a restaurant, like music, stuff like that, right? You're like, all right, well, then that's a different area. All right, that's just a different picture altogether. just okay. Words are kind of blurry, maybe use a different color, different font, maybe there's been different messages together. Right, so what you're saying is like, hey, you know what, it's an ad, I don't know if it's an effective ad. Whoever spent money on it, I don't know if they wasted the money, transfer to more net sales, or potentially why people lose it, these resorts or not, right? But imagine, right? Let's all just kind of analyze, like, hey, money went into this, right? So somebody had to kind of agree on promoting this to some effect. All right, advertising expenditures, right? You're given a budget, or you're seeking out a budget, right? We're going to talk about communications growth, goal, threshold effects, diminishing returns, carryover, wear out, decay. All right, here's some relationships between advertising and marketing expenditures and sales and profit, right? So here's an unrealistic assumption about the relationship between promotional expenditures and sales, right? So one of our assumptions is like, hey, you know what? The more money we spend is my assumption, right? Let's say without any real research, it's just my intuition that the more sales will come out of more money, right? A reasonable assumption, right? You think, I don't know, I did it. Get more exposure that way, right? I'll do social media ads, more people will see it, more people will click on it, and hopefully they'll buy the thing that I'm promoting, right? But it tend to be unrealistic, doesn't work that way. Remember we said, this is tricky. It's tricky, more attributes and features and characteristics and targeting certain individuals are part of this, the real component for making it successful. All right, so here we're kind of looking at a more realistic conveyance of it, right? We got sales response function curve on the x-axis, dollars on the y-axis, right? So we're saying, hey, you know what? The more dollars we spend potentially has reasonable relationship between making sales increase or having some sort of sales response of some sort, right? But there's a threshold to it, right? I would say there's some sort of threshold that can convey this. Because like, well, you know, more of those features and things that we talked about previously have to kind of come to this. So let's just kind of see what happens here. Right, we need things to desire to convey action. Here's one Piccadilly restaurant. Once again, this one's kind of blurry. It's day one of 8 days of giving, and we're gifting a $25 gift card. Comment below with your favorite holiday dish for a chance to win. We'll pick one lucky winner tomorrow, 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, right? There we say reach 29,000 people, right? It tends to be effective. Like, hey, you know what? This gift card thing, right? Gifting out $20 gift cards. You're like, all right, this appears to be maybe Thanksgiving holiday season. And we're asking you to do something, action. What's the point of this action? What's the point of saying, comment below with your favorite holiday dish for a chance to win? What's the point of that? What would be the means to an end for that? Right, think about it. So we got 29,000 people who this reached, and let's say we have 5,000 comments. We literally have just gotten free research to say, hey, out of 30,000 people, 5,000 people responded, took an action, and they told us what's their favorite thing. people want a benefit, a reward. The reward is $25 gift card, chance to win, for one lucky winner, and we got people to actually respond and tell us what their favorite dish is. So we know to push out more advertising towards their favorite dish. Might be apple pie, might be chocolate cake, could be stuffing, could be turkey, et cetera, et cetera. Right? So that's actually a pretty kind of nifty way to encourage action through advertising. All right, decay effects model. We say, hey, sales versus the campaign. Are we advertising or no advertising at different times, right? So we say, hey, we have a campaign, but now we have to figure out when is it actually pushed out. Well, push it out during certain parts of the day. We feel that that will probably reach more individuals at certain parts of the day as opposed to others. Because we have a budget, so we don't want to do a 24-hour cycle that's too expensive. And half of the time, nobody's even paying attention. So only pick out the campaign times in which people have the potential to be paying attention, have that sense of awareness, right? Now this could correspond, you say, hey, to a season, could respond to say maybe in a year time frame, could respond, this could be a reference to a day. Right? But you know what, put this stuff out during rush hour. Right? Let's say it's a digital ad campaign. Place a digital ad campaign during rush hour, morning, evenings, but outside of rush hour time, do not promote it, because we don't want to have to pay for those times they're going to be ineffective. Right? And then lastly, advantages of in-house versus external agencies, right? We say, how do we decide whether we want to do things ourselves, and how do we decide whether we want to hire an outside agency to help us with our advertising campaigns, right? Well, we say if we do it ourselves, it might be lower costs, right? We control the costs ourselves. Right? If we do it in-house, we can have more consistent message. We're not leaving it to the discretion of an outsider. Right? If we do it ourselves, we could better understand, but we have a better understanding of the product and the mission. It's hard to tell people on the outside about exactly what your product and your mission convey. Right? It may be simple, it may get a little bit of it, but we talk about the deep cultural meanings, history, sometimes it gets lost trying to convince others about that. All right, you may could do it faster in-house. You could work closer with leaders, right? The C-level individuals. And lower turnover rate in the creative team. Right? Okay, but if you go outside, the outside agency, like, hey, we can reduce costs potentially. They have greater expertise because they've been doing this for a long time for a lot of different organizations. They may bring a fresh perspective. Your perspective may be an old one because you work with the product every day, right? You're like, well, doing the same stuff is not always effective. You may want someone with a new, fresh, innovative approach. Maybe they're familiar with some new trends happening out in the world that you are unfamiliar with, right? Maybe they have a lot more research in other areas that would make more sense to your objectives. And usually these agencies hire top talent, so very, very creative people. People who are coming up with all sorts of innovative ideas that involve products and services. Anyone here who wants to work for a marketing agency or an ad agency? Is that your goal? Who here wants to work in marketing in general? So let me get, what exactly is the vision? What do you envision?
Just bring a community together through just stuff around the community, whether it be charity work, whether it be doing stuff outside of where other workplaces, or and then like I want to work for
so you're gonna do sports marketing?
Yeah.
And in the back, what were you thinking?
I was to work for like snack companies, so advertising my favorite snack companies and like come up with other ideas and stuff.
That's cool. What kind of, snacks we talking about?
Mondelez is the company. Mondelez is the company.
Okay. Cool. Right, alright, so you may end up maybe getting some sort of internship, I was at college. A good thing to try to get some sort of internship with an ad agency, so you can kind of get the full scope of research, promotions, and design, and all of that. Alright, so, lastly, before we get out of here, common services provided by a full-service agency. Right, advice about how to develop target markets, it's important. You like a streamlined target market, so you only reach out to people that matter, right? Specialized services for business markets, suggestions about how to project a strong company image and theme, important, right? How to reinforce, your image. Assistance in selecting company logos and slogans, right? Sometimes company logos, it seems like have no real relationship with what they offer, right? Preparation of advertisement and planning and purchasing media time and space, which is important. Like purchasing media time, is it television, is it radio, right? Is it some other form of, medium that you may use to purchase at different time slots to be effective. All right, that is it for today. Hey, has anyone reached out to income